Hi, Annalisa Six here with the Lady of Leisure and the Sober Curator to give you your March 2023 horoscope for the Sun and Rising sign of Sagittarius. Hello, Sagittarius. This is for us. I'm Sag Rising, so I'm included in this one. It's taken me quite a while to get all of the horoscopes done this month because I am having some flare-ups in my body from some of my health stuff, and so doing these videos is a lot for me. It's easier on me than sitting and trying to write an entire article out, but it's still a lot. It's a lot for me to like sit in front of the computer and just talk and talk and talk, and it's something I love doing, but my body has kind of this negative reaction to me doing very much. So I'm going to try to get through everything that I can. And if I'm a little discombobulated or all over the place, it's because I am just dealing with some brain fog and chronic pain that I've been experiencing. And unfortunately, not a lot that I typically do to help has been helping all the way. So it just is what it is. But March is a really powerful month for us astrologically. Since it's taken me so long to get these videos done, I've had some time to really sit and think about, what all this energy kind of means, and also absorb what a lot of other astrologers that I like to follow and colleagues of mine, have shared over the last couple of weeks regarding March. But March is one of those months of this year where we don't have any retrogrades, and so whenever we have a month without any retrogrades, it definitely feels more like an action month, because retrogrades slow things down and have us reflect in reflection mode or reconfiguration mode more so than direct action mode. But when everything's moving direct, we have this window of time to really get things started. It feels to me like energetically this month, even though we start out in the mutable Piscean energy at the first part of March, for most of March, the first 20 days of March are always Pisces season. So even though we do have a lot of this mutable energy in our ether for the month, even with some other celestial bodies, there's a lot of cardinal energy that we're starting the month out with in the sign specifically of Aries. And so we have 5 celestial bodies that are in Aries right now as we start March out. We have Venus and Jupiter, which we had a Venus-Jupiter conjunction on March 2nd. Today's the 4th now that I'm recording it, so we're a little bit out of that. We have Vesta, which is an asteroid, and Juno, which is an asteroid, also in the sign of Aries. And then we have Chiron, the wounded healer, in Aries as well. And so Jupiter and Chiron have been in Aries for a minute, Chiron a few years, Jupiter off and on over the last year. And Venus, has only been in Aries for a shorter period of time, and Juno and Vesta also a shorter period of time. And so having all of this energy together in Aries is special. It's unique. It doesn't happen all of the time. And it kind of gives March a little bit of this rev up into the Aries energy that, happens either way. On March 20th, we enter Aries season, the spring equinox. So, we're in this last little push of winter, but then we also have all this kind of momentous energy getting us through that with all these planets in Aries. And being Sagittarius, so Sag Sun, Sag Rising, this is for you. Aries is a really positive energy for other fire signs. Fire likes fire. However, with that said, when there's an emphasis of fire happening astrologically in a transit, and then us ourselves possess fire, it can put us really more into that polarity, right? So we're very much kind of operating more on that end of things. And Sagittarius likes to sometimes, Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter, likes to expand, it likes to grow, likes to evolve. Jupiter's the planet of expansion. Sagittarius is called the seeker of wisdom, the seeker of truth. And so when we have, our ruling planet, Jupiter, kind of enhancing that in this cardinal Aries energy, we might feel this boost to do that even more. We might, it's funny because my husband's boss actually, hi Jeffrey, you'll never probably watch this, but in case you do, hi. My husband's boss is a triple Sagittarius. So Sun, Moon, and Rising are all in Sagittarius, and he's actually in Rome right now as I'm recording this. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of Sag dominant people that are not on a trip right now, but like Jupiter being the ruling planet in a sign like Aries, and it making a trine aspect to the sign of Sagittarius, that enhances that desire to maybe go forth and explore or expand our brains, our minds, intellectually, philosophically, educationally, or to physically go and experience another culture. That's just a very generalized thing based off of what Sagittarius likes to do and the kind of archetypal qualities of Jupiter. But it's so much more than that if we were talking about it in the horoscope sense. So the area of the chart that this energy is impacting Sag for the horoscope has to do with our creative expression. It's actually hitting the house that Leo traditionally rules. And so this is the house that has to do with self-expression, creative expression. It's also our need to seek validation. So, the performer, the person that likes to perform, he often needs an audience, right? Not all of us. Some people like to perform just in the comfort of their home to themselves. I've kind of, as I've gotten older, fallen more into that category. But, initially when we're thinking about performing or expressing ourselves, it's to an audience. And what happens a lot in this area of the chart is that we're seeking that validation from outside of ourselves, right? And so if we're not getting that validation somewhere from outside of ourselves, we tend to implode on ourselves or get depressed or feel unworthy or feel like we're not good enough or like our art or our creativity isn't good enough. And one of the things about this house that gets lost on people if you're not, working on this side of your life is that our self-expression, the ability to create and then express it yes, bringing joy to other people is a great goal. Like, I think that's a great intention if you want to bring joy and make people feel good, but there should also be an intention that it's for you yourself as well, because you just enjoy doing it. If your motivation or your goals are always outside of yourself, always looking for someone else to approve or someone else to validate, you're operating from a place of lack. You're operating as if there's something empty that needs to be filled. But when you operate from a place of fulfillment, where you yourself are just filled, living your life, being you, expressing yourself, and you just enjoy sharing that with the world, you often avoid the tendency towards feeling lack or feeling like it's not good enough or feeling like, you need this outside validation. And so that's a journey for Leo dominant people and Sag dominant people. I mean, everybody goes through that journey, but when it's hitting that area of the chart, that fifth house, that's the area that has to do with our desire to express ourselves freely. It's also the area that's connected to children. And so this area is often tied to like our fertility and giving birth and our relationship to children, also said to be like a teacher house where, we educate children or help children express themselves. And as adults, this area of the chart, as much as it has to do with children outside of ourselves, it also has to do with our own inner child. And that the inner child is basically, the part of ourselves that's young, that still finds joy in things that kind of bring that sense of wonder and play. It's the playhouse. And that's what Leo and the fifth house is very much about, this kind of like internal youth play, laughing, joking, and sharing that with other people. But again, like I said, we can't constantly be in this state of lack of like, oh, I need other people to validate me. We have to be in this state of, I do this because it brings me joy. I think a really good, like maybe in Sag rising and this being, in whole signs, like where this horoscope is happening, it really resonates for me because I'm a Leo with Sag rising. And I am one of those people where a lot of my early part of my life was wanting an audience or wanting me needing to find purpose by seeing that reflected in the validation from other people. But the irony of it was a lot of times I didn't really care or like what other people had to say, or I was not always great at taking a compliment. So even when people would come and validate me or say that they liked what I was doing, I would do all this hard criticism in my head, like, yeah, but it could be better, or yeah, it's not good enough, or, yeah, like it doesn't really bring me joy though, so who cares, or I always kind of was in this next step, this next goal, like what's next. And, I'd always I learned at a really young age. I'm saying this for the Sagittarius person, because this is part of the Jupiter Venus journey. So bear with me on the anecdotal stories. I'm an anecdotal story person in terms of like giving examples as to why or how these transits are helping us grow. So the Sag complex is always seeking, right? And again, that seeking starts out outside of ourselves, which oftentimes can lead to addiction, where we're constantly looking to fill this void that for some reason think we have. And then what happens often for the seeker is that the journey gets reflected that it's a within journey. So for me growing up, I saw performers, I saw rock stars and, artists and, theatrical performances. My grandma was a children's theater writer, like she was a playwright. And so that kind of stuff was just around me all the time, and the arts, music, and I loved it. I loved the way that it made me feel. I loved the way that dancing and singing and songwriting and all that made me feel, but I've always been a little bit shy in terms of actual performance. And that's kind of gotten in my way a little bit with some of my desire to self-express or create, but I kept working on it, I kept doing it. When I was really young, I had this goal that I wanted to have a vinyl record out. I was in elementary school when I had this goal, because I started getting into this resurgence of punk music that was coming out on vinyl records. And I remember thinking, that's so cool. Even at like 11 years old, I want to do that someday. I want my music to be on a vinyl record. And it ended up being a lot easier for me to accomplish that goal than I thought. I thought this was going to take me like my entire teenage years, and it wasn't going to happen till my 20s. And I was going to spend my whole life seeking this fulfillment from finally getting this vinyl record out. And I actually accomplished that goal within a year. And so by the time I was 12 years old, the band that I was in, we put out a vinyl record on a small independent UK English, punk label that was just coming out. And, there's a lot of people involved in that helped us because we were young, but, it was me that was really the one driving the ship. Like, we're going to do this, I'm going to make this happen. And, my bandmate was also a huge part of that too, but she was also really shy, and so I couldn't be shy. Like, I had to keep that train going. And I remember when we got our record, and I just felt kind of empty inside. Like, it was kind of like shock, I think, where I was just like, okay, now what? Like, I had been climbing that hill for so long that when I finally got to the top, it didn't totally impact me the way that I thought it was going to. But I also was like, what was I expecting to feel? I think I was expecting to feel fireworks, like I was just going to have this invigorating feeling. And I think part of the difference was, it's not like we put a record out and then all of a sudden we were famous. It wasn't like, we weren't like the Arctic Monkeys, where our first album came out, we exploded. It was like our first record came out on this independent punk label. And sure, we were on a bunch of top 10 punk rock lists that year, and a bunch of the zines that were cool. Like, I think that's still to this day probably the most successful project I've been in, outside of one other one. But, I did when I was 12 years old. I've never lived up to that since then, basically. But, like, it wasn't enough. Like, I was just like, there's more. This wasn't supposed to happen so easily. It wasn't supposed to happen so soon. I was supposed to feel fireworks, so this must not be right. And so I continued to set these goals for myself that, at the time felt, as a young kid, impossible. I grew up in a small rural town where everyone thought I was crazy to have these big dreams, but I was that person, like, I'm going to go to Hollywood and make my dreams come true. And so as I started making dreams come true, it just kind of kept happening. And then that in succession, I saw sides of the music industry that were really gross and traumatic as a young woman, especially in my teens. And, I ended up in drugs and alcohol and, doing things to cope with some of the experiences that I had, or doing things to just play along to get along, trying to navigate that whole rock and roll, kind of scene. And what, in what inevitably happened to me as a Sag dominant person seeking answers and truth and, the firework feeling, the peak experiences, is I burned out. I burned out so hardcore to the point where I stopped finding fulfillment and joy in almost everything that I had put my heart and soul into, because it just didn't live up to what I thought it was supposed to live up to, whatever that was. And I was just constantly feeling disappointed by people or treated in certain ways where when I tried to stand up for myself, I felt like I was squashed back down. And it just wasn't, I didn't have a positive experience, unfortunately, with a lot of my creative pursuits. And so what happened for me was that I became overly critical of myself, and self-expression has gotten harder and harder and harder. And so when we see Venus and Jupiter in Aries, and it's conjunct with Chiron, which is the wounded healer, and it's in the house that represents self-expression and creativity, the superficial part, the more like kind of external part of that, is looking for like kind of what I did, where it's like we're creating this art, we're performing it, and then we're trying to align ourselves with the people that validate that and kind of prop our ego up or prop our art up, right? I don't have anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's a part of being human, a part of life. But the deeper part of it is that you're not valuing yourself based on what you get from other people. You're doing it for you because you're meant to express yourself. We all are in our own way and in different ways. Do I think it's wrong to have big goals around wanting a big audience? Not at all. I think that I'm so grateful I had those experiences, because it brought me to earth in realizing that performing in front of 1,000 people or however many people, 1,500 people, I don't know what the most amount of people I've ever performed in front of, but like these bigger shows, that that wasn't really what gave me life. Like it felt very it felt like something that wasn't necessarily invigorating to me. And if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't reached those goals or done those things or pushed that, I'd probably still be fantasizing about what that felt, that feeling that never came. I think there are things in life that we can chase that give us that feeling, but again, that feeling is temporary and it's a high. You're becoming an adrenaline junkie, you're chasing a feeling. So it's important that we enjoy the feelings, but also learn to equally validate ourselves in the off time away from that stuff. A lot of my friends who are also musicians that toured constantly, when they would end up at home without the shows and the creative expression and the life on the road, their life at home, they got really depressed, and then they leaned on drugs and alcohol, or, just peak experiences sexually or in ways that were really damaging to our psyche and our souls in a more spiritual way. And so I think there's a lot of people that go on tour and do that stuff and then have really healthy lives at home, domestic lives, spiritual lives, where there's that balance. And I think that for the Sag person, the Sag dominant person, this Aries energy is an opportunity for you to gain that confidence from within, and to not approach yourself like you're broken, that where something out here is going to fill you or fix you. It's better to approach life that you're a whole person, and there's many things that people can teach us along the way, or that life can teach us along the way, that just make us more full or more fulfilled. But if we're approaching ourselves like a hole that constantly needs to be filled, then we're going to end up disappointed every time that feeling dissipates. Even if we achieve it, even if we achieve a peak experience and we're like, this is it, that's temporary. That's going to move on. There's going to be a different spectrum of feelings and emotions. And a lot of people, if the pendulum swings really high, it has to swing back down the other way. So chasing those highs and those peak experiences can be kind of a risky thing to do as an addict, especially if you are somebody that struggles with addiction, which a lot of Sagittarius dominant people have those extremes, of like, even when you're sober, like even as a sober person, it's like, I'll just sit and want to shop all day on my phone to get that dopamine hit, like that'll be kind of my rush for the day. And I get that way about knowledge and education. Like I'll go down a rabbit hole for a week of just, this thing I'm really interested in because it's kind of, feeds that, or a puzzle, and I don't think there's anything wrong with satiating that part of ourselves in healthy ways, but we have to get really clear on the fact that it has to be fulfillment from within. Like when I'm doing a puzzle, the feeling of accomplishment is just for me. Like, yes, I could post that I did it on social media and share it, but it's like, it's for me to get that, feeling. And, making that about our art, or if we're musicians creating that way, it's good for us to create for ourselves. We don't necessarily need to share it with anybody. Like, that's okay, and that's something I'm working on. I'm working on, what's my relationship to my creative side, and how do I find joy in just doing it versus needing an audience or needing somebody to come and say, you did a good job. Like, it's good to work on that confidence from within. So that's the Aries theme. And especially for Sag, it's around creativity and self-expression. And, Leo is the sign that loves to push people towards feeling more confident in self-expression. I love cheerleading my friends that way. And that house, that's what it's about. And so if you are a Sag and you have any Leo friends that are good at that, you can take a page out of their book, because they're, if they're an evolved Leo, some Leos are still on that journey of having to learn to find that validation from within. But I think a lot of Leos do that effectively. I think Sagittarius tends to be more of the one that's constantly seeking, just because of that. That's the nature of Jupiter and Sagittarius. Okay, so let's talk about some other things going on. So Mercury, as of yesterday, moved into Pisces. So the first couple of days of March, Mercury was in Aquarius, but now it's in Pisces until the 19th. And so the area that's hitting for the Sag dominant person, Sag Sun and Sag rising horoscope, is the area that has to do with communication. So I'm sorry, not communication, that's where it's been, with your home. So this is actually a really good time to spend a lot of time at home. And also, Mercury being the planet of communication and being in the area that represents family, this is also a really good time to connect to your family, and whatever that means to you. If family is, your chosen family, like friends, that counts. Anybody that kind of gives you that home feeling. Also, this area is often represented by the mother. Some people think it's both parents, but there could be like stuff that comes up about your family or your parents during this time that maybe you're working through, not necessarily in a negative way, not necessarily in a positive way. It's different for everybody how that stuff comes up. But, if you have a relationship with your parents or mother figures, you might be talking to them a lot or wanting to connect with them. Mercury kind of amplifies the need to communicate or be chatty about those things. And, this is also Mercury in Pisces, the type of energy where it's hard for us to see things clearly. So sometimes there's a little bit of an illusion around the way that we're perceiving, but there's also this ability for us to envision kind of the dream of what we want in our lives. And this being around home and family, if you've been kind of wanting to do some things around your home that enhance the way that it feels visually, especially, and think outside the box, and kind of vision board home ideas, this is a really good time for that as well. Mars is also going to be moving through the last 10 degrees of Gemini. So it's moving into Cancer at the end of the month on the 25th. And so Mars has been opposite Sagittarius since August, which has been hard. I mean, Mars opposite anything brings tension and more of the kind of conflict around things. And so, Sag being the opposite sign of Gemini, you've been in kind of this holding pattern with Mars kind of being there, making things feel a little unstable. It's been unstable for all of us, but especially people with Gemini and Sag placements. So now that Mars is going to be moving into Cancer, this is going to be influencing the area of your chart that has to do with your shared resources. So if you're in a marriage, this will impact your shared resources like finances, investments, loans, that kind of stuff. And it can bring some challenges here. On a positive side, it can uplift libido. Mars rules this area of the chart, and this area of the chart also has to do with sex. And again, sex is also tied to our creativity. So that energy is getting boosted. But, you know, we might be having to work through some things with our marital partners around shared resources. This also impacts inheritance and things that get passed down to us. And Mars, you know, is considered in traditional astrology a malefic, which means that it causes problems. You know, Mars, there's action, but there can also be a lot of conflict around that impulsivity. And in Cancer, Mars, you know, is in its fall in Cancer. It's not a strong placement for Mars. It can make you a little overly sensitive to things. You could take things more personally. And so Mars, you know, is going to be transiting this area of the Sag horoscope from the 25th through May. So it's going to enter Leo on the 21st of May. So that's how long that we're going to have Mars in Cancer influencing that area. So, you know, I think that the best thing that I can advise is like around money, especially investments, loans, refinancing. It might not be the best time to pull the trigger. It might be a better time to gather information. And, you know, obviously Mars likes to pull the trigger. And so if it makes sense for you to take action in that way, as long as you're doing your due diligence and reading the fine print and making sure all the ducks are in a row, it should be okay. But it's just one of those transits where you just want to make sure that you're not impulsive and not doing your due diligence, because, you know, conflict can arise in that way, and just making sure that you're really, you know, on top of everything. Saturn, another big transit that we have going on starting in March, is Saturn moving from Aquarius to Pisces. So we've had Saturn in Aquarius since 2020, and now it's going to be moving into Pisces. And so again, the area that this hits for the Sag horoscope is the area that represents home and family. And Saturn, you know, is tied to our karma in a lot of ways. Like Saturn often in the birth chart is read as a parental influence, typically the father, sometimes the mother, though, when it's in the fourth house. And so again, you know, Sag dominant people might be working through some ancestral stuff, not necessarily trauma, but ancestral lineage stuff, especially with Mars and Cancer. Mars and Cancer in that area of the chart that's like shared resources, inheritance, mixed with the Saturn and Pisces and the home and family. There's definitely a big emphasis on karmic ties to legacy, family, ancestral, inherited traumas or money, or, you know, even good things, memories. You know, the fourth house with the family stuff is tied to memories. So you might have a lot of memories come up during this time. Saturn's going to be in Pisces until 2025. So it's going to be hitting this area of the horoscope, and for Sag rising people, for that amount of time. So yeah, it's a lot to work through. But, you know, there's also a really good energy for solidifying a foundation and doing it in a creative way, or in a way that speaks to you. Let's see here. Pluto is also entering Aquarius at the end of the month. That starts on the 24th, and then it's going to be moving back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn the rest of the year. The area that influences for the Sag horoscope chart is the house of communication. So I'm not going to get too into the outer planet effects on a horoscope, just because we tend to look at personal planets for horoscopes, but collectively, like transitionally, this is a huge energy for all of us. Pluto is going to be stationing in Aquarius officially for the next 20 years in 2024. And so we're getting that taste of it this year. And, you know, knowing that for Sag rising and you know, the Sag horoscope chart, it's affecting communication over that time. That also has to do with our perceptions of things. Those are some lessons that we're going to be working through and how we express ourselves. There's so much energy around expression for the Sag person. That definitely resonates for me as a Sag rising. Let's see what else we have going on. So there's a few transits that I talked about with Melissa LaFera that I'm not going to get into because it's just so much. It's so heady. But I'm just talking kind of about the stations that were happening with the planetary kind of, you know, energetic changes, and then the lunar kind of influences that we're having with the new and full moon. But the only other really big station that we have happening this month is Venus and Juno will move out of Aries and move into Taurus. I don't have the date for when Juno does. I think it's a few days before Venus, but Venus is going to be moving into Taurus on the 17th. and will be in Taurus for the rest of March. And so, you know, Venus is the ruler of Taurus. It rules Taurus and Libra. It does really well in Taurus. And this is a great time for, you know, us to kind of have her in her, you know, sign of domicile that is connected to the earth when we're approaching spring. So I'm really excited that she's going to be a part of the spring party. And the area that this hits the Sagittarius chart is health. So I'm really excited about that for myself on a personal level, just because I've been navigating so much stuff with my health, and in the Placidus house system, Mars has really been affecting my health negatively, I feel like. And so for Venus to come in here, you know, in the whole signs part of my chart, and then, you know, in Placidus, I think she's going to be there again. I'm just really excited because I feel like she's coming through to heal, you know. So Venus in Taurus in this area that rules health is there to kind of help you build a good relationship with your body, the way that you nourish your body, the way that you feed your body, and help build a lot of grounding in that. And, you know, it can also, you know, influence how we are in our relationships. Venus is that planet that rules relationships, relationship to our body, also relationship to how we're of service to other people can be more practical, more grounded, more romantic through sharing gifts and food and things like that. So it's a welcomed energy, definitely. And then Mercury, a couple days after that, is going to be stationing in Aries and joining the Aries party on the 19th. And so we're going to have Mercury in Aries in that same area of self-expression. So again, lots of energy around that. And then the next day we enter Aries season, the spring equinox happens. So the sun's going to be bringing all this vitality and energy there. So that'll be a really positive time. And I think the astrology is really good despite Mars entering Cancer later. So let's go ahead and talk about the moons and where those are hitting. So we have a full moon in Virgo at 16 degrees on March 7th. So that's just a few days from now. This is a great moon for spring cleaning. It's not spring yet, so I'm talking about kind of like the last little bit of winter purge, you know, getting rid of things, getting things in order. For the chart of the Sag, this is hitting the house that represents career. And so if there's certain things in your work environment that need to kind of get organized or cleaned out or put together, like cleaning out your desk, cleaning your office, if you have a home office, like making that really nice for the astrological new year, spring. And also if you have goals around your career, like new milestones, or you want to get a raise or things like that, this is a great time to put the kind of intentions and manifestation towards the career or work that you're doing. So that's really nice. I really am enjoying, I'm excited for that moon in a couple days. And then at the end of the month on the 21st, the day after the spring equinox, we have a new moon at 0 degrees Aries. And again, this is hitting that area of the chart that has to do with self-expression, creative expression. And so, and it's going to be conjunct Mercury. Mercury is going to be at 5 degrees Aries. And so another really good time to set intentions around building confidence around how you express yourself, and also around the validation that you seek. You know, I feel pretty good about the balance that I have in terms of self-validating. I think sometimes I come off a little arrogant because there's just certain things that I feel confident that I know how to do. And I think if people don't know me very well, they could think that I'm arrogant. But what happens a lot of times is that I'll let other people's judgments get in the way of me having confidence. And I'll be like, oh, I need to be humble, so I'm going to pretend that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm just going to stay out of it. And what ends up happening is I end up being right, and I end up getting validated. And I'm like, why do I ever question myself? And I'm also really good at admitting when I don't know something or when I'm wrong about something. But, you know, I think that so far this year, the beginning of my year has been a year of validation. I feel like I've been validated by so many things in the universe, where I'm feeling more and more confident in my knowledge and more confident in speaking that knowledge confidently, you know. But I used to let other people, their judgments or their insecurities, make me question myself. And because I'm one of those people where I've always tried to be more humble, I was really arrogant and obnoxious when I was in my teens, which I think most teenagers are. And so I just have it ingrained into my head, like, oh, like you need to be humble. You need to, you know, you can't be confident. And I think people think they mistake confidence for arrogance, and they may mistake humility or being humble for being kind of mousy, I guess, or just not being confident at all. Like, you can't be confident and humble at the same time, which I disagree with. I think you can. And I think that's a very good theme for Aries new moon in the area of self-expression, is that, you know, at a certain age and a certain point of your own education and your own life experience, you get to be confident. Doesn't mean it's right for everybody, though. Doesn't mean that your perspective or your truth is somebody else's or right for them, right? What works for me, I'm totally right about. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Right? So I think that's the difference there. And that's where the humility can come through, where you can say, hey, this might not work for you. It's worked for me. Here's my truth. Here's my knowledge, but take it or leave it. You know, I think that's the part where the humility comes in, is knowing that your truth doesn't have to be somebody else's in order for it to be right for you. I think I'm getting my lipstick all over my face again. I really screwed my lipstick up the first videos I did, and then I did no lipstick, and now I wanted to do lipstick again, but it's just, probably shouldn't have done it. So yeah, that's that new moon energy for Sag. So Sagittarius, this is a great month for you to work on inner validation, confidence around self-expression, trusting yourself, trusting your truth, self-love, rituals and practices, and your health. And again, be mindful with any shared resources, investments, and family kind of stuff around that. It could be a rocky end of the month, and April might be a little bit more rocky around that stuff. All right. Good luck. Happy March.